Hi everyone, and welcome to the first CTO Craft Bytes of 2021. Today we'll be discussing the bottlenecks that occur during development process and how to fix them. We'll discuss topics like how to stay on top of cycle time, PR review process, burnout indicators, developer focus shifting, and priorities. If this is your first time at CTO Craft, let me tell you a little bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting technologists with their leadership growth. Community numbers are now over 2,000 and provides one-on-one coaching, mentoring groups, an online community, and events like this one. And a huge thanks to our headline partner, AWS, for helping making these Bytes events possible. So today I'm emceeing today's session. So I'm Glyn Roberts. I'm the CTO of Digital Solutions at iTechArt. With me today is Keren, the co-founder and CEO at LinearB. Welcome, Ori. Ori, could you tell us a short introduction about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me first, Glyn. So I'm the co-founder and the CEO of LinearB. LinearB, we developed a software delivery intelligence solution, basically helping to solve problems like we're going to talk about, some of the problems we're going to talk about today. But in general, we built LinearB to help software teams, whether they're big, up to 150, or small teams, like to execute better and improve in every aspect. Before that, I was VP of R&D. I had like two interesting journeys with companies. I was VP of R&D, VP of engineering for 10 years with two interesting companies. I'm based in Tel Aviv. I didn't say that, but two companies that were acquired, one by AT&T back in 2007, and another one called CloudLock, which was acquired by Cisco 2016. So my experience includes taking small teams and scaling them up to 8, from the first people up to 80 people, and with all the challenges that come with it. This is why we built LinearB. At my core, I keep saying I'm a developer. I really like to build stuff. Hope to come back to do that one day. So that's in high level who I am.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you here and to talk with us today. So for the audience, you can ask your questions at any time from the Ask a Question link just below the video. So yeah, let's start talking about dealing with delivery bottlenecks. So Ori, so what are software delivery bottlenecks and why are they important?
Yeah, so I like to start thinking about software delivery bottlenecks, and I like to do usually an analogy to pure software. Let's say you develop a system, in sort of like a business app, and you have your database and REST services, and some business logic and some tasks that need to work on some sort of workload. You can run with this app, and once it's scaled, you can experience some slowdown, right? And it could be the database that is out of connection pools. It could be that the REST services are now have starvation and you need to spin more tasks up. Those are bottlenecks in pure software. And if we take this analogy and we apply to the dev process, the same thing happens. So, it can be at a strategic level. We've seen companies that were not staffed right between projects that the CTO was trying to make sure that a team delivers on. But it's more important or more interesting on a team level, where you have usually you have the traditional steps of a development pipeline. We like to compile them all into the super metric called cycle time. So let's say a product owner writes hopefully a good story that us as a developer, we understand, okay, this is what we need to achieve. This is how it helps the business to achieve a goal. Now, our goal as developers is to break this story into tasks and to start shipping them through the development pipeline. And this cycle time is usually constructed out of these 4 phases. I'll go through them quickly, but we can then later focus on each one of them. But if you look, the first part is when you coding time, right? So you code, you write your tests, and then once it's ready, usually there's some sort of a PR that's going up, or a pull request or merge request, and then some time will pass until something, whether it's automatic or a person picks it up and start to look at it and start to see, okay, if everything here is ready, is in the right standard. Then there's some cycles of reviews, and And the last stage, and by the way, we had some interesting customers that told us it's not really the last stage, but usually the last stage is, okay, the code is merged, it's ready to go to the hands of the customers. Now, how much time it takes between the code is merged and until it's deployed? That extra step that I mentioned, by the way, some of the customers are saying to us, or friends and partners are saying, you know what, it's not the last phase, because sometimes once it's out, you want to control it with feature flags and still not fully deploy it. So maybe there's an extra phase. But each one of those, the important thing when we try to define what are the software delivery bottlenecks, each one of those are a phase in the development pipeline. And like, if we go back to our software analogy, you can have a bottleneck in each one. So you can have, sometimes I've seen a pickup time of 10 or 12 days. So definitely a bottleneck, something you need to handle. Make sure that PRs are being picked up faster, so your entire development pipeline is more efficient with higher quality. So honestly, like to try to sum it up, same as you will monitor your actual software and will look for like things that are stopping you from the service, like to operate like at maximum capacity. Same happens to your dev process, and that's basically the software delivery pipeline, and the bottlenecks are where we are stuck in those situations.
Okay, so what are the indications of bottlenecks? Obviously, as you mentioned there, an increase in timeline to be able to reach each stage. Is there any other indications around that, or is it just purely the timeline that you look at when identifying bottlenecks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We can go back again to the software analogy, and we can look at our app and say, our app is performing very well, and all of a sudden we kind of feel like a slowdown, right? So that's an indication. We see, hey, now we need to jump in and let's search for where's the slowdown. Is the database like out of connection pools? What's happening here? We can start like try and pinpoint the problem. So that's, but if we're like more professionals, probably there's telemetry on the database and on the REST services and everywhere, and then we can be proactive. We can measure everything in advance and react fast to problems that we see in our software. Same goes for software delivery bottlenecks. If you have the right infrastructure to measure, that's like the start, that's the baseline. If you have the right infrastructure to measure, then you can start seeing, when things are kind of inflating and going up, and where are the areas that you need. They can be in specific services, specific teams. They can be in specific areas in the dev pipeline. So measuring is everything. I do, however, want to say that I can definitely see that this concept of measuring your development pipeline is kind of a new concept. I would estimate that between 20 to 25% of the teams out there are starting to fully like measure it, react to it, deploy policies of what happens if something goes over a certain threshold, etc. So I also think it's important to equip people with like, even if you don't have it, what are like the indicators, like you said, that will tell you, hey, something is wrong here. So, my recommendation is to look at the ceremonies on the dev ceremonies, so you can look into like a retrospective, but it usually happens, in a longer cycle, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, or whatever. The daily meeting or the stand-up is also very important, and I would recommend like first to listen and not just wait for our turn to talk. That's, by the way, a general tip for life. Like if we should talk, but we should also listen to what's happening. And I would look for things like, if you have somebody in your team saying, can you guys help me review this PR? And then you hear the same person return the same request the next day. Then, hey, like some light should light up and say, we have a problem here because nobody's speaking the PR. So, or if you have somebody saying, yeah, I know that this is the success criteria for the iteration, but here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to first focus on this customer issue. Then I have this depth that I didn't do. And then I'm going to come back to this thing. When you hear these people talk about what they're going to do like this, these are also usually indicators that something is wrong, right? Because we're not helping our team to be focused on one thing or maybe two things. So yeah, maybe to make the answer shorter, the best way like to start discovering the bottlenecks is to measure. That's the base for everything. Once you start measuring and you have visibility, you can detect where you're off. But if you're not, here are a couple of tips that can help you. What I just mentioned, to say, okay, we probably have a problem in some of those areas.
Sure. I mean, what you mentioned there is interesting around, identifying with individual users. So when a bottleneck is identified, is it normal that it can be attributed to just one member of the team, or is the whole team normally responsible for that bottleneck occurring, would you say?
Yeah, my belief is that development is team sports. I'm a huge sports fan, so I don't know, like we're in the UK, so like whether you like football, what Americans are calling soccer, or basketball. I played basketball, and I think development is a team sport. So the most important unit to look at and search for like bottlenecks is at the team level. It's never one person's responsibility. I'm going to talk about how you can identify, some pressure or something that you can do to relieve a specific individual. But from high level, this is a team thing. So, and again, going back to our examples, if I'm working as fast as I can, but I need somebody to review my PRs and nobody's doing that, what can I do as an individual? I need some of the team members to help. And there are other examples for all that. So I definitely think that bottlenecks are things for a team to solve, and we can talk about. I even think that I heard radical thoughts that I like when people think out of the box. That even performance review is more important to do it at a team level than an individual level. I've seen this company that says, hey, instead of doing individual performance review, we're doing it at a team level. And the team will organically know how to either help improve the people that are having trouble, or if they don't want to improve, they will probably be out of the team in some sort of a scenario. And if it feels too radical to people, maybe somewhere in the middle, you can, when you do a performance review to individuals, I would dedicate at least 50 to 60% of that performance review to, hey, how do you perform? How does the team that you work on perform? So bottom line, this is like a team thing to solve. I do want to say that usually what will happen if you have like a lot of like these bottlenecks and you don't have like the right culture to solve it, usually your junior developers, the people that join like, maybe the last, you will see that there will be the symptom of the problem, right? So you will see them moving between tasks, have like a big whip counter, work in progress. They will be burned out because they will want to succeed so much, so they will work off weekends. So it's a team thing, but look after your people, because sometimes like the early symptoms, you can discover them at your like junior developer. So I hope it answers what you asked.
Yeah, definitely. So the first question is from the audience, and it also ties in very nicely with my next question as well. Anyway, so the audience question is: what are examples of delivery metrics which could be used? Average time of reviewing, PRs, or successful build counts. And my question equivalent to that is let's cover some of the bottlenecks, some examples. So this ties in nicely together.
Yeah. There's so much things you can measure, but by the way, I also think it's important to focus, right? To choose the right things to measure around the delivery metric. I'll start with my favorite thing around the delivery bottlenecks. My favorite metric is pickup time for pull requests. That's by far my favorite one. It will. There's no silver line. There's no like, okay, this one metric, if you do it right, all the other problems are solved because, we can game the system, we can make sure that, the pickup time, but if organically it happens that you have a PR pickup time of, I would say less than 2 hours, you're in great shape. This is usually a great indication for great teams that are taking care of each other, aware of, where they can help. So that's one delivery metric that everything around cycle time is important, but if I have to choose one segment, I will do that. Two other things that I really recommend on measuring that will tell you if you're in the right direction in terms of delivery metrics is deployment frequency. This one it's tough because we sometimes, I see teams then they say something like, hey, you know what, our business don't need us to deploy more than every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. So that's a good cadence for us. I'm trying to go back to this team and say, okay, great. Come up with like an internal deployment or internal delivery, because you still want to create this cadence where you deploy in small chunks all the time, right? Even if it doesn't go to the customers, do it even internally. So deployment frequency, if you can get to deploying multiple times a day with, of course, the right, balances, checks and balances in place. I think that's a very important metric. And maybe the last one that kind of plays with it is the PR sizes. It's an art to take a story that is that long and the product owner saying, hey, we got to deliver this feature, and to break it into tasks. And then within task, like break it to small PRs, maybe even smaller than 50 changes. If you get to those areas, then I think you're in good shape. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of improvement. But those are at least my favorite metrics at this point in time.
So, as that example of PR time of the PR size, how do you actually go about rectifying that issue? Is it more of a general conversation with the team saying, look, ideally we want smaller PRs with smaller numbers of changes, or is it something more authoritarian where you get PR reviews rejected if you are over these type of use cases? How would you go about approach solving that problem?
Yeah, so it starts with it always starts with the team together, whether it's a manager or a flat structure. That again, usually in every team of squad 8 to 10 people, you will have the leaders, whether it's social leaders, or you'll have the 2 or 3 people that are more opinionated. So it starts with getting a buy-in that this is important. That's the first step. I wouldn't go and block PRs that are over 30 before we have the right conversations and consensus that this is important. So I wouldn't go and block PRs that are over a certain. So it starts with that, getting everybody to the same culture, mindset, and work around it. Then there's a lot of honestly, it's a skill set. Taking a task and breaking it into small tasks that can go all the way to production. It's not simple. It's not a simple thing. You need to learn how to do that. You need to deploy feature flags, right? That you can, with high confidence, release it, so you know it won't do damage to your production environment, right? It won't do any data corruption. That you can roll it back really easily if something goes. So it's a combination of the consensus, get some education, get the skill set, and then once you've done that, Glyn, you can go to the areas of, hey, we're deploying a policy where we want to say, yeah, we don't want PRs over 50 changes. With our product, we can actually say, hey, if something crossed this threshold, give me an alert, and I'll know. But that's the end. The end result. This is where you want to go after you have this consensus and after you have you built the skill set to be able to deploy those policies.
Sure. Wonderful. Okay, so one of the biggest ones for me is the focus factor with the issue of context switching. Not everything that a user does is ticketed. I like supporting team members, attending meetings, HR calls, or anything like that. How do you identify issues like this that could potentially be perceived as poor performance?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll first go back to what I told you before. I think that performance, if I'm ever like a VP of engineering or VP of R&D again, right now we have like a person who's running our organization, our dev org in LinearB, and we have constant talks. I would say, hey, like performance is much more important at a team level. Help your team. Yeah, do measure your teams. Help them like with choosing the right metrics and the right KPI. There's the saying that your KPIs will define your culture. I really identify with it, because if I'm as a CEO will come, or the VP of R&D will come and say, listen, we like people that write a lot of code. Write a lot of code. Like that's like how you'll be measured. You will probably create like a bad culture, not something that we want to encourage. But if we will talk about the right metrics, they will create the right culture that we are trying to create. So going back to your question about like the teams, I would focus first like the performance around teams. Then what will happen if you have less of these cases where you say, hey, I'm looking at I'm in the performance review and I'm looking at what this person is done. So he didn't write a lot of code this week, but you I don't know, maybe just did design work or a lot of reviews and things like that. So I think managers should spend less time there and more to focus on the team. If you have to measure individuals, one of the things we do every week, we say, here's the top reviewer of the week. This person did the most reviews and reacted the fastest. So you encourage like these type of behaviors. And if I remember correctly, one of like your early part of the question was about like not everything is ticketed, right? No, we don't have data about everything. So, and I don't think we should honestly, I don't think we should go and create tickets for everything. I think, by the way, that something is broken in how we work with those systems. Like it's mostly us as developers need to go and do our work, and the system needs to learn what we did. So less about us moving tasks and things around manually. But one recommendation I can give, I heard people talk about reviews, and they would say, listen, like we do reviews, but we sit together in a room, and we do like sort of like not pair programming. Apologies for the noise here. I'm sitting with my peer, and I can give him comments on, sitting on the laptop and say, hey, why did you do this and why did you do that? And then I would say, hey, this is great. Honestly, again, I had a talk with Kent. I had a privilege to talk to Kent Beck, and he has like this extreme approach about saying he invented pair programming, or was one of like the people who talked about pair programming, and I think it's great when people sit together, but in 2020, also log it in the Git system. Write the comments back into your Git system, because A, more things will be logged and can be attributed, and B, this is one of the best knowledge bases that I've seen built organically. So when a new person on board, I can give you an example. I worked in two teams. In one, I remember that all of the PR comments that I've seen were around like coding style. Hey, like, indentation and pet 8 if you're in Python, or linters were running, and hey, you should code like this. So, and I'm not necessarily saying if I agree or disagree if it's the most important thing to focus, but immediately I knew, hey, this is what's important here in this culture, in this where I work. So I knew how to align. And in another team that I came to work, I've seen people talk about more architectural decisions, right? So so I would say you're right. The data is not always there, but we can also do a better job in improving and making sure we're logging the data about our review process and others better.
Sure. I mean, the pair programming piece has always been a conflicting mindset in my view. For onboarding, absolutely so valuable. See how you work, support as you go. But I know there are some organizations that all development gets done in a pair programming manner. And in those contexts, it's hard to validate, your cost of development versus output, because it's going to be probably 50-60% of what it would be with everybody individually. So again, this is where you're talking about the business value in the work that you're doing. Okay, so let's say hypothetically we've identified a bottleneck. What's normally the time period you'd expect to see improvement from action taken to support that?
Yeah, so I think that the heavy lifting is identifying it, like you said. Usually, it's 50% of the job is like identifying. Here's where we have a problem. You already, I think, did half of the job once you identify. That's where it's tough. Even again, if we go back to the software analogy, I've seen us making mistakes, thinking like the pressure is on the database while it was in other place. So pinpointing the right place and understanding is very important. That's 50% of the job. I think once you did it, I see almost like two phases. The first improvement, you'll see it immediately. It's almost like the classic 80-20. Like you will do a small, not such a big initiative, and you'll see a huge improvement. Like I have examples again of teams that took their review time from like 6 days to 10 hours or something like that over like a month, because it's really easy to do the first flip. Now to take it from 10 hours to 20 minutes, that's where it becomes like more demanding. This is where you should probably start not just looking on mean and median numbers of each service or each team. You should probably start to say, oh, here are the outliers. First, let's see. Maybe, by the way, sometimes there are errors, right? We will say, hey, this is just a branch we worked on the side. Please exclude it from the calculation. So sometimes it's those things, but sometimes it's okay. Let's figure out those outliers and now dive into them. And that's how you get the next level of improvement. So the first, I think, I would do 3 steps: pinpoint and identify the problem. That's halfway through. Then the first improvement you see very quickly if you put some practices. Then I think the next level, as always, are more difficult. But here's the cool thing: the best teams that I've seen, and I've read it in researches, and I agree 100%, are the ones that are restless. They don't stop. Like even if my my PR sizes are great, and I'm never fully happy. I can be happy is important, but never fully 100% satisfied. Let's push ourselves to the next improvement.
Okay, great. So it's an incremental process. You never say that, within a month, I expect this issue to be dealt with. It's going to be, you see some improvement and then you're expecting more improvement just as you continue till you get to a point where at least the business is happy with, and the best teams are never happy. They always want to go further with those metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, by the way, you can improve, and then life happens, and then you can see a degradation over here. So yeah, it's always about continuous improvement.
Excellent. So let's move on to a couple of the audience questions then. So the one that's most voted at the moment. So how do you limit context switching without reducing collaboration between developers? For example, when a few key members keep on getting interrupted by others. So in my mind, obviously supporting additional team members, or it could even be the PR process where, maybe there's only the leads that are doing the PRs because of the process. So what is, in your mind, how do you limit the context switching in those circumstances?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's about habits. So first of all, if you're in a dynamic that you have, let's say 10 people and only 2 are reviewing PRs, I will try to break it, make sure it's I think everybody should review PRs, but sometimes it's hard. You just onboarded, so it's okay. But 80%, 75% of the team should be reviewing PRs. So that's one thing. And then obviously immediately it would reduce the context switches because you have more people that are responsible in that. And I know that some of the people would say, yeah, but we have sensitive areas in the code. We don't want. So, deploying the right policy of in what areas it's okay for everybody to review PRs and in what areas it's not, that can also help. I also heard, I want to say 2 other tips that I've seen. So first, measure your work in progress. your whip. Like again, in our product, I'll try to be modest and not try to push it too hard, but you can see how much parallel task each member has. So if I'm working on 3 branches and I'm doing 2 reviews, like my whip will go up. So you always want to keep it like below a certain level and be aware of it and measure it. That's a good start. And one other tip or maybe 2 other tips that I've seen happening is that there's a lot to the visibility of what needs to be reviewed. I'll tell you what I mean. Sometimes, we have, unfortunately, we have meetings, obviously we're trying to cut down the amount of meetings we have as developers and make more async meetings. And even if we have a daily, make it 15 minutes and not 45 minutes, and we can talk about how to achieve those things. But we do have meetings. So sometimes I have 15 minutes until the next meeting. Now, if I have to work 10 minutes to find the list of the PRs that needs to be reviewed, and then really quickly assess, this one is going to take me 2 hours. This one, if I have to go through this process, and it's 10 minutes to go through this process, and then I have 5 more minutes, I'm probably going to go and drink coffee or tea or whatever I like to drink, and I wouldn't like in these 15 minutes be able to take one more PR. So even the visibility with the time estimation is super important. It already helps like to reduce like this overload. And one last tip I want to say, I heard it from somebody and I love it. I've seen people that before they close their day, they go and look, instead of saying, okay, this is what I need to do tomorrow. This is the task that I need to push, because I'm working on them. I'm going to look at on the PRs that are waiting review, and I'm just writing. These are the 3 that I'm going to take tomorrow. The first thing that I'm going to do tomorrow morning, I'm going to do those 2 or 3 things. And it really helps, like when you come in and then you take work off, like really in the morning, already before the day started, and you just enabled somebody like to move faster. So those are the tips. There's no magic to it. I know the people might be hearing the answer, say, yeah, but we're still going to be the ones that are overloaded. But it's constant work on the things that I mentioned that will help like improve that.
Sure. And what about the context switching issue outside of the PR process? So essentially, you're the lead in the team and everyone keeps on bugging you because you're the person that knows the most. You're the person that can advise them outside of a PR context. Is there any way to help manage that, not be so impactful to their daily work?
You're saying I'm the early developers or the team lead, and I get a lot of interruptions or
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, again, no magic answer here. I think spreading the knowledge across the other team members is always helpful. It's always about I keep saying to someone, when you help somebody, think about what you can do so the next time this person has the problem, you can solve it on his own. She can solve it on her own. So it's not just I think that's one of the best qualities that a manager has. Like if I'm being interrupted because they need help, I'm going to spend a little bit more time, show that person around. This is how the area looks like. This is how the pitfalls here. Now next time you wait 30 minutes before you come and talk to me. Try to deal with the problem. So equip the people with tools more to gain confidence, and I think that those are important qualities of managers. You can also solve it with data. You can again apply policies. You can block time. I've seen people blocking time, saying in this time I'm working, I'm coding. Please don't interrupt me during this time frame, or send the question in an async way in a Slack channel or Microsoft Teams or whatever you use. So when I'm freeing up, I can do that. Then I'm not context switching every 5 minutes. I control my time. I think it plays a very important role here. So I think those are my tips, or maybe how to over time reduce the the context, which I see people saying, hey, there are like tools to block time. Yeah, that's great. Tools to block times are great. I even think that it's super, it's super reasonable for me as a developer saying, listen, we have meetings. In these 2 hours, I'm coding, I'm working on these things, and don't schedule meetings for me in these times. I've seen this working, and people respect that.
Sure. There's a few times I've scheduled focus time, but I always get meetings in them anyway. But my role's a bit different. I'm not hands-on development anymore. But yeah, I mean, essentially, as you mentioned there, sharing inside Slack channels, I think, is really useful as well, because it allows other team members to contribute and try and solve the issue without the lead or the most experienced person in the team to always be interrupted. It allows the rest of the team to enable each other, not just one person constantly being the enabler for the whole team in those circumstances. Okay, great. So a couple more questions again from the audience. So would you agree that zero downtime deployments should be a key technical goal in order to enable more frequent delivery? So this is obviously going back on your frequent delivery cycles.
I think it's amazing if you get to that. It's great. Zero downtime deployment. It's usually I can tell you, for example, on our team, that we have in some areas, we have like, blue-green deployments where it's like zero downtime, which is great. But in some other areas, we would not necessarily like reach this level in some other services. But we were still able to like get the deployment, the time to deploy, meaning like from when code is merged until it's like being deployed to a very small time, because there's a lot of deployment automation. Again, we're working in small chunks with some of the services. We do want to do them a little bit more manual. So yeah, I think the problem with setting the bar there, saying, hey, zero downtime deployments, only when you get there, it's like you can improve. It's the fact that the bar is high, right? You need a lot of like infrastructure. So kudos to the people who operate like that. Definitely will make a huge impact and huge effect on your pipeline, and will reduce bottlenecks. But for all of you that are still not there, you can still improve a long way without getting necessarily to zero downtime deployments.
Sure. I mean, I would have expected startups to be able to achieve that quite easily with the cloud infrastructure solutions you've got right now, with A/B deployments or load balancer managements in a cheap and cost-effective way. But obviously, the larger organizations with a history of code and things all over the place, those are obviously the challenges in those circumstances.
Yeah. We meet all the organizations, right? If you start today, there's a lot of like, and the technology. You're right. You can pretty easily start on the right way. But yeah, there's like legacy code, teams that have been running 7 years, monoliths, still not everything is in the cloud, which is okay. Like this, our industry is improving all the time.
Yeah. Okay, then next question from the audience then. How transparent are you with the team about the metrics you're tracking? So within both the dev teams and the executive team?
100% transparent. 100%. I don't want a single metric that we measure that a developer can see and I can see and every manager. That's what I believe. I don't think it's setting up the wrong culture, like to say these are metrics that only managers see. It requires two things. It requires to stay away from stack ranking developers, saying this one is better than this one, right? Because could be like you said before, right? I'm helping. I had a peer that every code that when I was still coding a lot, everything that I pushed, I wanted him to review. He was like the best. He would sit and read the code like for 3 hours and give me comments and so, like you said, maybe if we look at that person, like performance, maybe it's not like the best, like because he wasn't coding a lot. And I would say two things. A, be transparent, don't stack rank. This is a different type of person. This is a mentor, which is different than an individual contributor. It's like you shouldn't compare them. Then once you get to this confidence and this psychological safety situation where it's more about the team and how we operate together, you can also allow yourself to look at some individual metrics again. Not comparing, but yeah, I want to know how fast people are picking up my PRs. It's an interesting metric that I want to see. I want to see if code that I'm writing is being reworked, right? The work like a code churn is an interesting metric that will tell me if, 3 weeks or a month after I release something, we had to refactor some of it. And not because I want to point finger and say, hey, this is a bad developer. This is how I will improve. So I believe in 100% transparency. Never hide the things that we measure. Share it with the team. Roll it out with the team. Present it. That's what's different in our solution. Like we do rollouts. We want everybody to have access. That's our philosophy.
Sure. Do you normally have to reiterate the metrics to them? So like every sprint planning meeting or every all hands meeting in the organization, is it something that you normally need to replicate, or do you just document it so everyone has a single place to go to? How best to communicate these metrics out to the rest of the business?
Yeah, so there's like how you communicate them internally inside the R&D department. Yeah. So again, if you have a tool, it's visible for everyone. We do a retrospective with it, but yeah, in like weekly R&D meetings, I know our VP of R&D is like using the pulling stuff out of the tool and showing. When we communicate up, I was as a VP of R&D communicating to my CEO, and now as CEO, I communicate to the board. Yeah, we're pulling those metrics, putting them without being ashamed on the deck of engineering execution. Being 100% transparent and honest. This is how we'll educate, because something needs to happen between the business and engineering. Like you will go into every board meeting and you will hear people talk about the sales funnel, right? Like this is the top of the funnel, and here we have problems in qualifying. You can talk about the process in a very transparent way. Why should engineers shouldn't do the same? Like this is our process. Hey, we did good here. We need to improve in the review time. So I hope it answered the question. I believe again, full transparency in both of the directions. And by the way, I'm a CEO who was a VP of R&D, so I'm really open to this, and I know I'm waiting for these numbers as if I want to hear about these numbers as much as I want to hear about our marketing numbers and sales numbers. But my advice to engineering leaders that have more of like a sales bias CEO, if you come with those metrics, repeat them 2-3 times, explain, educate, you'll start getting attention. People will understand what you're trying to do, and will ask smart questions about your process and how it affects the business. So when this thing happens, it's sort of like the magic. I've seen companies accelerate.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point. When you do have a sales-focused CEO, it's going to be data-driven like that. So providing that information does offer clarity of why it's important for these metrics. Otherwise, a sales-driven CEO wouldn't understand and therefore be able to ask questions appropriately. One more thing you touched on there was about you don't measure individuals against each other, which I completely agree with. Do you measure teams against each other?
Yeah, teams have, it's not against each other, but teams have, like we said, transparency. I believe that teams should be able to see this is how we operated in this iteration, and the other team should see how they operated in this iteration. So if you can see them side by side. By the way, if it's a data science team, they have longer cycles, right? They need to try models. So it's not about stack ranking them as well. But I believe in transparency of seeing team A. This is how team A operates, and this is how team B operates. If there's one area that I think healthy competition inside an R&D organization is that, because then you can get this unity as a team. We want to improve as a team, and again, it's not it's less about stack ranking them, but being transparent. Hey, our cycle time is this, and this team cycle time is that. Don't put it in a table, number 1, number 2, number 3, but side by side, it's okay to, hey, instead of saying this is better, what can I learn from them to improve as well, and what they can learn from me. This is how I look at it.
Sure. Okay, wonderful. So the next question from the audience then. How do you manage the threshold between the business, for example, marketing, content design, and the dev team when it comes to tickets for sprints? The example they've given is how to avoid a situation where development is being asked to estimate or work on a ticket for which the content will be ready tomorrow or later in the week. So in other words, the context isn't defined clearly yet, but they're still expecting some estimation or work to start earlier.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but let me see if I got it. So you're saying marketing or product say, hey, we gotta do this thing. This is an important, like, urgent task.
I think it's around, like the process of an expectation for the development team to be able to start progressing a ticket in some way, where there's another department that's a dependency on being able to provide all the information or context for that ticket.
So how do we start progressing even before we have the context? That's what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah. How to avoid situations like that occurring, how to stop a situation like that actually occurring. Because obviously if you're managing the development team, but then there's external team pressures to obviously kick off something which is dependent on another department or team to obviously feed into.
Yeah, so let's say, I'm going to repeat an example. Tell me if I got it right. So let's say marketing team saying, hey, we got to do this. It's still not fully, clear exactly what this task, but let's say, I don't know, we got to do a self-serve mode really soon. And so I think it's all about setting expectations and saying, listen, this is what I think when smart engineering leaders say, I have all kind of outputs that I'm outside of iteration. One is I'm delivering software. Okay, we release this thing, it's great. But one of the outputs of this iteration is I'm going to take what you guys said that we need to do, and with the best of my knowledge, I'm going to build an estimation. By the way, it won't be perfect, but I'm telling you in advance, the output of this iteration won't be a piece of software. It will be an estimation of what we can do. And then, I've seen people understand it and respect it. Like, okay, so what you're going to say to me at the end of this iteration is how much time it's going to take, more or less, even though I didn't fully understand the requirement. Then you do another refinement on what exactly you're asking. Then maybe we can estimate it better or something like that. And we can do a different talk about estimations. Some people are going to no estimations at all, and some people are in favor of estimations. But I think that's really important when you are able to provide different kind of outputs, not just, hey, I'm delivering this piece of software, saying my goal is in the end of the iteration is to tell you smarter things about this task. People appreciate it, and then it buys you time, and then the requirements are being refined more. So I hope it answered the question, if I got it right.
Yeah, please correct us, Steve, if it doesn't. But yeah, to my understanding, I think it does, where essentially you need to understand the difference between a detailed estimate and a t-shirt size estimate, where you don't have all the context, you're just making a rough estimation based on what information you're aware of. And as long as the clarity is there on the different types of estimations, then there should hopefully be no misunderstanding when it comes to obviously re-estimating again, because the context has changed in some way.
Yeah, and also say, listen, estimating is a piece of work too. I need to read the code. I need to understand. I'm going to invest 2 days in being able to estimate this for you, which is important. So
sure. And Steve's just responded now. Sorry for the fuzzy question, just like those fuzzy requirements. So essentially, I think we're on the right tracks there. So what are the next questions from the audience from Neko? What engineering metrics do you bring into the executive meeting, like the sales and marketing metrics that we always see? So you have touched on this, so you could go into a bit more detail with that.
Yeah, so right now I have like this comfortable table that I'm sitting in, and the engineering manager in LinearB is bringing like the metrics in. So cycle time definitely plays one of the most major things that we keep on tracking. it tells us like our cadence, our internal cadence. If you are able to reduce cycle time to small chunks, like end to end, like from the minute like a code is being written and until it's in production to 2 or 3 days, you're in good cadence, and a lot of good things will happen. The velocity and all these like fluffy numbers that not necessarily are always like the right way to measure will kind of like align and will be like will also work well. So that's one of the things we're tracking all the time. We look at the investment profile a lot, meaning like what type of work are we doing, right? So it's both in terms of how we staffed on each project. I remember as a VP of engineering, my CEO was asking every quarter, okay, how many people, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. And I had a list of 20, but I had like in some situations, 15 people. I said, I have 0.2 people working on this project. It's not going to succeed. You need like a critical mass. So how is that? But also on what are we working on? So are we fixing bugs? How much percentage of the work is like for bug fixing and firefighting? How much percentage is for like non-functional and building infrastructure? I love infrastructure as code right now, like things that are pushing us forward and are reducing our technical depth and enabling us to accelerate. And how much, user stories and epics and functionality. So that's a third thing, another thing that I'm seeing like our engineering leader bringing to the executive table.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, then so just go a little bit more like back towards the metrics in the team. What would you say are the burnout indicators, and how can you as a manager support your team members when you see these?
Yeah, so remember we talked about it. When we said improving and detecting bottlenecks are the team's responsibility, but what will often happen, like probably your juniors, the people that join less, you will see some of kind of those individual burnout indicators as a symptom of a problem as a team that needs improvement. What we usually see, like, I think like 3 things. The first things that you'll see high WIP, high work in progress. And again, in LinearB, you have an alert. If somebody has 6 or 7 branches in 7 days that are touching them, they're probably context switching too much, trying to make everybody happy because this person came and said, okay, we need this customer issue, and this person came and the product came. So that's definitely a burnout indicator. Like if you have a developer that's in this state for 2 or 3 weeks, they're not happy. Trust me. Like we want to work on 1, 2, 3 different things top. So that's one. The other one is that's one of the things I'm most proud of, like in our product, and we use it all the time. If somebody is working 90% of the time, weekends, things jumps in and say, hey, go check on them because this is not a good behavior for overtime. They will burn out. So you see them pushing commits in Saturday and Sunday, and so it's really important. If you see that behavior, sometimes it happens. You have to. We're in the software business. When you have a version that needs to go out, it's natural that everybody's aligning, even weekends, unfortunately. But if it's consistent behavior over 3 weeks of like, there's no, I like to run, so like there's no other activity that you do, like some people meditate, I don't know, something that you just disconnect from work and you do other stuff and you can see it. So I would use like the days that people work, not as, hey, work more days, but the other way around, like take days off to get some rest. So that's like an indicator. And the last thing is like the type of work. When, like we said, like when people are just focused on firefighting, and they're not working a little bit on this new technology thing that excites them, and a little bit about this new infrastructure that help the team improve. When you see like 50% or 60% of work on bugs, etc., this is like another indicator for a burnout. This developer would be unhappy in a 2 to 3 weeks time frame. And when you identify it early, by the way, there's no replacement for good management. Good managers will notice this, but data helps because it surfaces those things like faster than you can track them manually.
Absolutely, yeah. Managerial or like the team lead aspect is so important because the metrics follow for what the manager will be able to see at the early stages. Okay, just to tidy up on the last question then, as we start to finish this event. So, what do you think you should be putting in place to track your engineering team's activities to be data driven to support with identifying issues? So, if we just go over what metrics you would traditionally put in and how you track those in place, like how do you actually measure it as well?
Yeah, so we covered the metrics. We talked about them. I would say I know that the native platforms like Git and Jira are starting to give a little bit of those metrics. I think it's in a very basic level, so it's not enough, but you can start there. Then you can deploy tools. You should deploy tools. I'm saying choose a competitor of ours, but deploy something that will help you measure. Of course, I'm joking. Choose our tool, but as long as you start to measure and you start measure with the right philosophy in mind, right? I'm not here, like we said, to stack rank developers. I'm here to make sure that the teams have like everything with the right philosophy. It will help you. And I've seen, when teams get bigger a little bit, I've seen also when team has 100 developers, I've seen smart managers dedicate like a team of 3 or 4 people just to collect those metrics and have them ready all the time. So I think if you're a startup, probably like choose like either a free tool or something that is cheap enough and it will give you like ROI. This is why we chose to go after this business. We think that 2 or 3 years from now, everybody will use those tools. So we talked about the main metrics, and in our site there's a metrics run book on like what are the important things that you can look at. You don't have to be a customer to get the value out of it. And then I would say, in the next year, choose a tool. And if you're big enough, I think you should have a team focus on engineering operations.
Sure. So it's actually a full team actually purely focused on the metrics management.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, it's been fantastic talking with you, Ori. Thank you very much for joining us today. You can connect with Ori after this event on the links I've just shared now. You've got his LinkedIn, the website, including the podcast and the Discord community as well. Also, next Friday, we have another CTO Craft Bytes event, Damage Control, Fixing the Fallout, with John Wards, Head of Software Engineering at The Economist, and moderating is Emma Hopkinson-Spark, who's the Chief of Staff at 101 Ways. So thank you again, Ori, for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. And thank you for the audience for joining. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks a lot, guys.
See you. Bye-bye.